Singapore announces 61 new Covid-19 infections, the lowest in almost 4 months.
The painful truth is this: we are not returning to a pre-Covid-19 world.
A stark warning there. Trade and Industry Minister Chun Sing says Singapore must chart a new path and build a new economy now.
And taking a stand against the illegal wildlife trade, Singapore is crushing $18 million worth of ivory into dust.
A very good evening. Now we're back from the long weekend. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
And I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
We begin with the latest COVID-19 figures in Singapore. 61 new cases were confirmed today. This is the first time since April 16th, almost 4 months ago, that the number of new cases has fallen below 100.
Today's count includes 2 community cases, both Singaporeans, and 3 imported cases. The majority of the rest are migrant workers in the dorms, and more details will be released later tonight.
Singapore is not returning to a pre-COVID-19 world and must chart a new path now. That's the message from Trade and Industry Minister Chun Sing, speaking in blunt terms this morning after the release of GDP figures. In the second quarter, the economy shrank a record 13.2% on a year-on-year basis and record 42.9% from the previous 3 months.
For the full year, GDP is forecast to be between -5% to -7% compared to the previous range of -4% to -7%. Mr. Chan said that means the growth generated over the past 2 to 3 years will be negated. He added that in the coming months, retrenchments will increase and some businesses will be forced to close.
I know that some are still hoping for a quick recovery and a return to the familiarity of the old normal. The painful truth is this: we are not returning to a pre-COVID-19 world. Recovery will still be some time yet, and the recovery is not likely to be smooth. We have to start now to build a new economy and to create more and better job opportunities for our people. We cannot wait for COVID-19 to blow over.
On the jobs front, the government has been stepping up efforts to help employers and job seekers. Manpower Minister Josephine Teo said that 92,000 opportunities comprising traineeships and attachments have been committed and made available as of end July.
7 in 10 of those positions are PMET roles. The figures are part of a new weekly jobs situation report. In spite of the softer labour market, there are pockets of hiring, and Mrs. Teo said job seekers should not be discouraged.
Now, we do recognize that it takes a lot of effort for everyone to bounce back, but that is what we must do in this time. Be very resilient and know that we don't walk this journey alone. There will be career coaches, career ambassadors to support you along the way, and many government schemes backing you, giving support to the employers to consider you.
CIMB economist Song Seng Wun joins us now. Now, Seng Wun, Trade and Industry Minister Chun Sing talked about the need to build a new economy given that Singapore won't return to pre-COVID-19 times. How would the vision of a new economy be made possible?
I think it is still really work in progress. As we learn more about the coronavirus, I think we are adapting strategy as well. Much really will depend ultimately on how free a movement we're going to get from goods and services travel, cross-border travel, travel restriction remains in place for how long, and even something as simple. I'm still working from home as well as the office. We take turn. Going forward, the new normal, a new economy, is it a case of combining the two, or will we continue to see, far less people in the CBD area while we decentralize? And how are we using technology in helping, whether it is a delivery of a service or production of a good? So all these things are essentially how we are coping with the challenges today. Those challenges might still remain
Seng Wun, last week, the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office forecast that Singapore's GDP will expand by 7% next year in 2021. But where is the growth going to come from?
In the broader sense, almost all industries will see a big recovery. But there will be some that continue to be, I would say, going to be facing significant headwinds. Aviation, transport engineering, as I say, if people are still not going to be allowed or feel confident or confident enough to travel around, you and I still sitting in the studio at home, or rather being able to jump on the plane and go for a long weekend, etc. in Bangkok. If that's not going to happen anytime soon, it still means that their activities are going to be pulled back. Now, back to that 7%. Statistics are very interesting. Let's take that 7%. This year, let's say for our official forecast now is contraction of between 5 to 7%. Let's take 7%. When it dropped from 5% and we recover 7% next year, we're not back to that original level. Let's take, if you happen to earn yesterday $100, today you're 7% down, that's $93. Now, tomorrow you're going to earn 7% more, 93 of the 7%, just bring you back to 99.5. You say, hey, not bad, wow, still almost there. But in terms of the broader economy, more people are joining the labor force. Kids, graduates will be joining the labor force. So not enough money in that sense to split among more people, say. So salary, wage expectation may be cut. So this is where the challenges remains going forward, in that bad one year, good next year doesn't bring you back to where you have fallen from.
Right. So in the meantime, Seng Wun, how can the average person weather this recession?
In the case of a recession, a deep one as it is, there will be businesses and household that comes under pressure, and unemployment rate will come through. How, I suppose, the economy will generate job very much depends on how the public sector, private sector, I would say, work together to kind of create jobs in this environment. New technology, yes, but not everybody will be able to head down that road. A lot of, I think, the emphasis has to be on sometimes the individual themselves to take on the challenge of changing, adapting, to do something else, pay cuts, etc., to be able to perhaps move into a new area by taking that first baby steps towards a change.
Right. Well, thank you, Seng Wun, for your time and your insights. We've been speaking to Song Seng Wun, economist at CIMB Private Banking.
Meanwhile, as the economy battles a recession, one of the hardest hit areas is the aviation and tourism sector. At the Singapore Airlines Group, more than 6,000 of its 27,000 staff have taken no-pay leave of varying lengths to help the company cope with the collapse in air travel.
And more than 1,700 employees, including ground staff, pilots and cabin crew at SIA, Soka and Scoot, have signed up for volunteer positions and jobs in external organizations. Unlike several other airlines, the SIA Group has managed to stave off job cuts so far.
Now, to discuss this further, we are now joined by Brendan Sobie, an independent aviation analyst and founder of Sobie Aviation. Brendan, last month, SIA said it raised about $11 billion in liquidity so far for the 2020 and 2021 financial year. Now, SIA has also tapped government support, including wage subsidies. How much of a respite is this for the national carrier to help tide over this difficult period?
Yeah, so $11 billion, which has been raised so far over the last several months in terms of liquidity, is a really large amount. It's more than any other airline or airline group in Asia. So it really provides ample liquidity and cash for what would be a prolonged downturn, which is what we're now expecting. So even if this continues for 2-3 years, SIA has the ability to weather the storm and come back strong once we're finally out of this pandemic and once the international travel market has finally recovered. They also have the option of raising another $6 billion in convertible bonds, which they can exercise next year should they choose to need another $6 billion. So they clearly have enough to get through this. And then there's other government support as well, like you were mentioning. including the wage subsidy scheme. The wage subsidy scheme has been providing about 40 million per month, backdated all the way to last October. And that has helped the airline or airline group avoid job cuts so far because they are able to get some support from the government to pay the workers. The wage subsidy scheme is set to expire at the end of this month. There might be some extension of it or a wind down, but inevitably the government won't be able to provide this forever for like a 2-3 year downturn like we expect for the industry and for Singapore Airlines. So unfortunately, that could lead to some job cuts at some point. So far, there's been a lot of unpaid leave, which has been in place since the end of February and has been expanding and continues to be offered. And but that only does that's not forever as well. There's only a period of time that those obviously will lapse.
We know international borders are not going to reopen anytime soon, although smaller, more specific permitted travel arrangements like the green lanes with China and Malaysia are in place. How have the lack of progress in reopening these borders and establishing travel bubbles in Asia affected SIA and in general Changi Airport, Brendan?
So Singapore relies entirely on the international market. So without travel bubbles, without the resumption of international travel, not much traffic can be generated. So far we've seen Changi traffic levels at over 99% down compared to normal, and Singapore Airlines also more than 99% down. And the reason is there's only a very small amounts of people generally repatriating traffic. So people heading home, maybe they've lost their jobs or they have new jobs, or people who were maybe stranded outside Singapore who need to come back. That's the only traffic that we've seen so far. And what the bubbles do is it allows more, what's referred to as two-way traffic. So not just one-way repatriating traffic, but actual real traffic where people are leaving and coming back because they have essential business travel or other kinds of travel. But so far, these two bubbles that have been announced so far have had very limited impact. So until we see more bubbles and really bubbles that potentially have a significant impact on air travel, maybe leisure travel or just business travel bubbles with less limitations, there's just not going to be any pickup in traffic. We're going to be stuck at this 99% down level until we have meaningful travel bubbles. And right now, in the immediate horizon, there doesn't seem to be any chance of that. So both the airport and the airline group is stuck in this really difficult situation.
Now, on that note, even when air travel is allowed to resume, it will not be how we knew it to be. SIA is also currently working on its fleet review. How will SIA change when all these conclude?
Well, the SIA is having a big review right now, and it should be done by October. So SIA is going to look a lot different than what we are used to SIA looking like. And it's during the pandemic, the airline is obviously very small. It's only operating about 7% of its normal schedule, and load factors have been about 10%. So 9 out of 10 seats have been empty, and mainly the airline's just carrying cargo. And of course, there's all these protocols in place, in terms of cleaning, in terms of face masks, and and everything else that's been implemented to ensure safe travel. But in the long terms, Singapore Airlines will also be different. So even when we're out of this pandemic, say a year from now or 2 years from now, the airline will be much smaller for at least a couple of years. It might be 4 or 5 years before the airline is back to its normal size, and they'll be relying on smaller aircraft. Their network won't have as many destinations. Of course, they won't require as many employees as they have in the past as well. From a fleet perspective, the A380 is particularly vulnerable as they review their fleet going forward, because the A380 is by far their largest aircraft, and there's just not enough demand to fill it. The question is just how many aircraft do they really need? And also the 777s, which is the second largest of their aircraft, those are all grounded right now, and a lot of those won't come back. So right now they're relying on their smaller wide bodies, the 787s and A350s, which are, I think, better positioned for the downturn and the reduced demand. And they're also going to rely more on narrow bodies, including the 737s, which are now at SilkAir, but they're going to be transferred over to Singapore Airlines over the next several months as SilkAir goes away and Singapore Airlines absorbs SilkAir. So you're going to see a more narrow body heavy fleet. So there's going to be a lot of destinations in Asia that used to be served by wide bodies that will be served by the smaller narrow bodies for the next few years, I suspect.
Great insights, Brendan. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. We were speaking to Brendan Sobie, an independent analyst at Sobie Aviation.
In other local news from today, the National Parks Board will be crushing $18 million worth of illegal ivory. The haul weighs around 9 tons, the largest destroyed globally since 2016. After samples are taken for analysis, the ivory will be pulverized, then incinerated. Southeast Asia is a hotbed for wildlife trafficking, with Singapore serving as a major transit hub for illegal items.
Singapore adopts a zero-tolerance stance on the illegal trade in wildlife. We will be crushing around 9 tons of ivory later to signify and reaffirm our commitment to play our part to combat the illegal ivory trade. This includes the major seizure of 8.8 tons of ivory that Singapore made last year, which was estimated to have come from the senseless slaughter of nearly 300 African elephants. Crushing this ivory we have seized ensures that it will never re-enter the market and will help disrupt the global supply chain of illegally traded ivory. This sends a clear signal to poachers, traffickers and dealers that Singapore resolves to stamp out the illegal trade in wildlife passing through our city.
NParks also launched the Centre for Wildlife Forensics today in an effort to boost its detection and diagnostic capabilities in the fight against illegal wildlife trade.
Meanwhile, Lee Sheng-wu, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's nephew, wrote on Facebook today that he will pay a $15,000 fine for contempt of court. He wrote that he decided to pay the fine to avoid, quote, giving the Singapore government an easy excuse to attack me and my family. Mr. Lee ended the post by saying he does not admit guilty and disagrees that he said anything illegal in a 2017 private Facebook post, where he wrote that the Singapore government is, quote, very litigious and has a pliant court system.
Olympics-bound swimmers Joseph Schooling and Song Seng Wun were granted extensions to their national service deferments. Both were given long-term deferment to compete at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, which has been postponed by a year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But if the Tokyo Games ends up being cancelled, then Schooling and Kwa will be scheduled for enlistment. That's what's making news in Singapore. For the global headlines, here's Dylan Ang.
Thanks guys. Let's take a look at the global headlines, beginning with coronavirus news. COVID-19 cases worldwide pushed past 20 million on Monday, with the United States, Brazil and India accounting for more than half of all known infections. The death toll stands at more than 738,900. The Philippines reported yet another highest single-day increase in new COVID-19 cases at 6,958. While in Australia's Victoria State, a small rise in new COVID-19 infections was reported today, boosting hopes that case numbers are stabilising following a lockdown in Melbourne. The state detected 331 new infections in the past 24 hours, compared to Victoria's peak of 725 on August 5th. Hong Kong's Apple Daily tabloid promised to fight on in a front-page headline above an image of owner Jimmy Lai being detained. Readers queued from the early hours to get a copy of the pro-democracy paper, a day after police raided its offices and took Lai into detention, in what was the highest profile arrest so far under the national security law. The paper said more than 500,000 copies were printed, up from the usual 100,000. Former Malaysian Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng pleaded not guilty to a charge of abuse of power under Section 23 of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act today. He was charged alongside his wife Betty Chew Gek Cheng and businesswoman Pang Lee Kun. Yesterday, Lim had also pleaded not guilty to a charge of using his position as then Chief Minister of Penang to solicit a 3.3 million ringgit bribe related to the Penang Undersea Tunnel project. Several tech giants, including Apple, Facebook, Amazon and Microsoft, are the latest to join the court battle against US President Donald Trump's ban on new visas for temporary foreign workers. Mr. Trump had issued a proclamation suspending a host of non-immigrant visa programs on June 22nd. The group cited the ban's irreparable harm on businesses and the nation's economy and asked a court to be allowed to add the industry's voice to a lawsuit opposing the ban. The 52 companies separately filed a similar request in a challenge to Mr. Trump's actions pending in Washington. And those are the top headlines around the world. It's back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Dylan. Now, news in a few minutes ago, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Health Ministry has given regulatory approval for the world's first COVID-19 vaccine after less than 2 months of human testing. Developed by Moscow's Gamaleya Institute, this approval paves the way for mass inoculation even as the final stages of clinical trials to test safety and efficacy continue.
Now, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, do visit straitstimes.com. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.